After the Bun posted a leaked picture of this 30-inch Harley Benton Baritone, I knew I was going to have to pick one up on release. Fast forward 1 month and 4 shipping delays later, and here it is. Let's quickly hear how it sounds in the context of a full mix, then we'll jump in and chat about it afterwards. This guitar is currently tuned to Drop E with Winspear's 14 to 76 gauge drop set. The guitars in this one are all running through ML Soundlab Amped Flagship. This release was a very smart move from Harley Benton. They're fully capitalising on the recent surge of interest in the Squier vintage modified Baritone Jazzmaster. The Squier Baritone Jazzmaster is a discontinued 30-inch model made famous by bands like Loathe. Loathe themselves have since switched to more widely available guitars, namely the Gretsch G5260 and the Sub-Zero Rogue 6. However, that hasn't quite stopped the market's desire for these Baritone Jazzmasters. Other bands to have used these Squier Jazzmasters include Black Tongue, Scolds, and even the Wonder Years. Since the demand for these Squier Jazzmasters skyrocketed, the price did too. While they were initially around the £350 mark on release, you can now see them on Reverb for upwards of £1,000. We are slowly seeing the price of the Jazzmasters come back down, but I don't think we'll ever see it quite match the RRP. The specs on this Harley Benton are definitely inspired by the Squier. Most importantly, this guitar has a 30-inch scale length and a hardtail bridge. This is actually Harley Benton's second offering for 30-inch scale 6-string guitars, the second of which being the Guitar Bass VS. I actually own the Guitar Bass, though I've modded mine beyond recognition. If you'd like to watch the video of that one, I'll leave it in the description box below. Other than that though, we've got a poplar body, a bolt-on Canadian maple neck with a purple heart fretboard and 21 frets. It actually feels like they used pretty decent woods on this guitar. The body has a decent weight to it and the neck feels super stable. For the electronics, we've got 2 vintage style Alnico P90s, we've got 1 volume, 1 tone and a 3-way toggle switch. For the hardware, we've got a Hipshot style hardtail bridge and Clouson style vintage tuners. The neck shape on this guitar is super comfortable. Compared to my Guitar Bass VS, it's a narrower, thinner neck, but is also more rounded. The gloss finish on the back of the neck isn't sticky and slow like I was expecting it to be. It's actually smooth and pretty comfortable. While I had initially planned to sand the finish off and replace it with oil and wax, I actually really like how it is now, especially after a little bit of Dunlop wax. I do want to talk a little bit about the P90s in this guitar. It seems like a bit of a weird choice, especially since Harley Benton were going so closely to the Squier in terms of specs. I know Harley Benton used to throw P90s in all of their Jazzmaster shaped guitars, but recently we've been seeing them use the traditional Jazzmaster style pickups in the guitars like the JA60. If I were to guess, I'd say they probably locked the specs of this guitar in before they switched over to using the flat Jazzmaster pickups. And as much as it would have been cool to try out the Jazzmaster pickups in this, the P90s are absolutely stellar. They're not noisy at all, they're super thick sounding, and they still have plenty of bite and aggression. Now let's take it over to the bench and pop the pickguard off to see what we got going on underneath. As you can see, the routing in this is pretty tight. You might be able to fit an uncovered humbucker in, but I don't think you'd be able to get a covered one in. I did try to fit a humbucker through the routes in the pickguard, but it was just a couple mil out, so at the very least you'd have to route out the pickguard to accommodate humbuckers. One thing I've noticed Harley Benton taking real advantage of recently is gaps in the market. This was especially noticeable when they released their MR Modern, a traditional looking Mosrite guitar with a baritone scale length and modern specs. They've been pretty consistent recently with releasing models where there's no like-for-like alternatives at their price point. The closest non-Harley Benton competitor to this JA Baritone will be the Sub-Zero Rogue 6, and even that's nearly double the price of this. Plus, the only real comparisons between this and the Sub-Zero Rogue 6 are they've both got a hardtail bridge, a 30-inch scale, and a general Jazzmaster offset shape. I have seen the Sub-Zero drop down to about £199 during a sale, which would make it a great contender up against this, and I'd love to try one out someday. So let's talk about quality control. I've been keeping my ear to the ground about this release, especially after ordering mine. I've heard a lot of people mentioning that the tuners are quite low quality, and the electronics leave a lot to be desired. Well, unfortunately, my guitar was one of the poorer examples that I've seen. The stock setup and out-the-box experience of mine was actually pretty abysmal. The second string was buzzing all the way from the first fret to about the 15th. The low string was flubby and sounded like a rubber band. The tuners were really difficult to turn, the guitar wouldn't stay in tune, there were scratches over the body, scuffs on the fretboard, and the inlay job was rough as well. Where they haven't cut the inlays to the right size, the glue has pulled out of the slots, and this is apparent on the 15th, 17th and 19th frets. After a thorough setup, most of the QC issues went away. That said, there are still a couple of outliers. Obviously I wasn't able to fix the inlay job, and the stock tuners are barely even passable. Usually you can turn the tuners for a bit with no change in pitch, and then all of a sudden it'll snag and you'll way overshoot the note. Somewhat frustratingly, this is exactly the same issue that I had with the tuners on the Guitar Base VS, so it does kind of disappoint me that they haven't fixed this issue since. With this being a Harley Benton, lots of people are going to want to mod these. I did consider dropping a set of P90 size humbuckers in this one, but since I already have two super long scale guitars with humbuckers, I figured I ought to keep this one with P90s, for now at least. I will say the bridge on this guitar is completely fine. I think if you were to swap this one out, it would either be for aesthetic tastes or just preferences. I don't think this one really needs to be swapped out at all. About the only thing on this guitar that I actually feel the need to swap is the tuners, though it's hard to find vintage style tuners like this in black. I quite like the idea of keeping this guitar close to stock. The Guitar Bass VS was a fun mod project that I just threw everything I had at it, but this one doesn't really need all that much. This JA Baritone really feels like it's close to holding its own, just straight out the box. I will likely swap a couple things out as time goes on, but I am seriously impressed with the quality of most of these stock parts. So while I'm fairly sure that this guitar isn't going to be scalped quite as hard as the Squier vintage modified baritones, it is selling out fast. Within just a couple of days it hit the #1 trending spot on Thomann for baritone guitars, and within a week it had sold out to the point of 5-month wait times. Given that, I think it's pretty likely that we're going to see some more variations on this guitar. I have heard that there is a left-handed version of this guitar in the works, which is absolutely massive because left-handed players don't really get many opportunities to play super long-scale baritones. I would like to see this one come in some more colours and some more different pickup options. Maybe not the vomit-inducing Antigua burst found on the Squier, but definitely some more brighter, modern, poppy colours would be really nice on this. I also hope we see a variant with humbuckers in the future. While it wouldn't directly benefit me, I know there's a lot of people that would want that. Here's just a couple of mock-ups I put together to give you a kind of idea of what I'd like to see. So, in conclusion, would I recommend this guitar? This one is pretty tough to answer. I'm not sure how confident I'd be with rolling the dice if I didn't know how to do a basic setup. This guitar was extremely sketchy out of the box and needed a fair amount of tech work to get it to even a playable condition. I had a much better experience out of the box with the Guitar Bass VS, but then in turn that one needed a lot more mods to be usable in a metal context. Ultimately, if you know how to set up a guitar, you're going to be in for a great time with this one. This guitar has been immensely inspiring to play, and for the price, it's very tough to beat. That's all I have for this one, so if there's anything else you need to see of this, or any questions you've got for me, leave them in the comment section below.